So just a quick introduction. As Jill said, my name's Emma Spick-Fletcher and I work in the early years team at the Department for Education. And I'd like to take a moment to reiterate the thanks that Jill gave earlier. We know that the last 2 years during the pandemic have been extremely challenging, and this has been particularly true for those of you caring for our youngest children. Your response to COVID-19 has been of national importance, and we'd really like to thank you for rising to these challenges with such professionalism. Thank you for your commitment, hard work and dedication, and for doing your utmost to deliver high quality early years education in extremely difficult circumstances. We know the work you are doing will have a lasting impact for children. We know you continue to face significant challenges due to the ongoing impact of COVID-19, and as our attention increasingly shifts away from the immediate response to the pandemic towards the future and recovery, it is more important than ever to champion early years education and its crucial role in supporting every child to realise their potential. And during this session a bit later on, I will talk to you about the COVID-19 recovery programme and give you some information about that. So that leads me nicely onto today's events. We're delighted to be able to welcome you to this Learn, Explore, Debate event, which for the first time is primarily aimed at school-based early years practitioners and staff, as well as head teachers, school leaders and governors. But we know we have quite a wide range of attendees in different roles, including local authority colleagues. So a really big welcome to you all. And as Jill said, again, thank you for taking the time to be able to join these events today. So given the audience, I just wanted to briefly mention the upcoming schools white paper, which you may be aware of. The white paper will set out our long-term vision for schools with a focus on achieving world-class literacy and numeracy, and we know that the work required to achieve this ambition of ensuring that no child is held back by low levels of literacy and numeracy begins in the early years. We will be able to share more on the white paper following its release. We really hope that you will find the event useful today in terms of informing you about the work of the department, supporting your practice, and arguably, most importantly, the chance to network with peers and colleagues across the sector. I'd like to thank NCB and everyone who has worked hard to make this what will be hopefully an engaging and useful session for you. So on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to start talking to you about an update with the EYFS reforms, which, as you know, became statutory in September 2021. Or could we move to the next slide, please, Taryn? So the new EYFS brings a strengthened early years curriculum and clearer approach to assessment. The key aims of the reforms are to improve child outcomes at age 5, particularly in early language and literacy, which is so important for closing the outcomes gap that continues to exist between disadvantaged children and their peers. The reforms also aim to reduce the amount of time practitioners and teachers spend completing unnecessary paperwork and tick lists and seeking to record children as on track or not on track. Instead, they can focus more of their time and efforts on what we all know is most important for improving outcomes, and that's high quality interactions with the children in their care. And it's great to see that some of that was coming through on the Menti poll earlier on. We've got a dedicated session on assessment under the new EYFS later on today, which my colleague Anna will be leading on, so we'll go into some more of that detail during that session. During academic year 2020-2021, over 3,000 early adopter schools volunteered to implement the new EYFS 1 year early. 70% of those that completed feedback surveys felt the reforms would help to reduce their workload in the long term. We do know that DfE and Ofsted need to continue to work with the sector to support understanding and implementation of the changes and the messages they bring on effective curriculum and assessment, and diverting energy away from excessive tracking practices and towards language-rich engagement and learning with the children. We also recognise the valuable role of local authorities in supporting early year settings and want to continue to work with LAs on this journey. Next slide, please. So thinking about some of the implementation support that we've put in place so far to help with the reforms, we've developed a range of support. This includes publishing an updated development matters document to support teachers, childminders, practitioners to design and deliver an effective early years curriculum that places language development at the heart. And this development of development matters was expertly led by Dr. Julian Grenier. Development Matters also includes specific guidance for children in reception year. We've also published an updated guidance document for parents, what to expect in the EYFS, that aligns with the new EYFS framework. This was designed based on testing with parents and carers and how they usually access such resources, so it is easy for them to read on mobile devices and avoids lots of dense text. We've launched a new online service called Help for Early Years Providers, which is aimed at childminders, nursery leaders and preschool practitioners. It provides resources, advice and support to help practitioners understand the requirements for each area of learning and development and what these mean in practice. And since its launch in April 2021, it has been accessed by approximately 60,000 users, and we have received really positive feedback on that so far. We know that people wanted more information about supporting children with SEND under the revised framework, and a new document led by Pengreen's Children's Centre has been published that offers practitioners guidance and resources on supporting children with additional needs and SEND. And we've also published a series of webinars aimed at practitioners, childminders, school leaders and reception teachers. And we've also run events for local authorities so they are well placed to offer guidance and support to their settings, to settings in their area. Next slide, please. We continue to work closely with Ofsted as the reforms are embedded and to deliver the joint message to the sector about what Ofsted will and won't expect to see during inspections, particularly in terms of unnecessary assessment paperwork. We have published a small suite of videos with direct messages from the DfE, Ofsted and early adopter schools talking about their experiences in delivering the reforms and how they have changed their approach to the EYFS assessment. We also have a case study from White Knights Primary School, which was also an early adopter school, later in today's event, which we hope you will find interesting and helpful. A new vodcast has also been published this month, specifically focused on Ofsted inspections, including a presentation from Ofsted and 2 case study settings talking about their recent inspection experience. And of course, we are delighted that Ofsted are here with us today and we'll be hearing from them during their session later on. And last but by no means least, on the 8th of March, we have published exemplification videos to provide support for schools when completing the EYFS profile assessment for children at the end of reception year. These are a collection of case study videos that demonstrate teachers and leaders having professional discussions about individual children's development and their EYFS profile judgments. A vodcast for schools, MATs and local authorities has also been published alongside the videos to explain the changes and what is different this year. And as I said earlier, the next session is dedicated to assessment under the new EYFS, so I'm not going to say any more on that at this point. It is clear that in the years following the immediate fallout from the pandemic that the ambitions of the EYFS reforms are more important than ever. We are committed to continuing to work with the sector to embed the reforms and robustly evaluate their impact, including on outcomes and on workload, to determine where they have been successful and where more needs to be done. Next slide, please. So on this next slide, I've just included some useful links to some of the resources and documents that I've just spoken to you about today, and the slides will be available after the events, as Jill said, so we'll make sure all of those are sent out. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to move on to talk to you about educational recovery from COVID-19. We know this is something that teachers and practitioners are worried about. The government have confirmed almost £5 billion of additional investment in education to support children, young people and families recover from the effects of the pandemic. In terms of funding for school, this includes, but is not limited to, £1.5 billion for national tutoring to provide up to 100 million hours of tuition for 5 to 19-year-olds by 2024, £253 million new funding to provide 500,000 teacher training opportunities, £200 million for the continuation of the holiday activities and food programme, and £650 million universal catch-up premium for schools for the 2021-22 academic year to further support pupils who need it most. You will also no doubt be aware that there is additional specific funding for early years education recovery. We are delivering a wide range of support as part of this package, and whilst we don't have time to go through all of it in great detail today, I am going to talk to you about some of the support that is particularly relevant to this audience and that you might find most interesting. Next slide, please. So we know that the earliest years are the most crucial stage of child development, that early education supports children's social, emotional development and lays the foundation of lifelong learning. The pandemic has exacerbated the outcomes gap and set back children's learning and development, particularly in language and maths, hitting those from disadvantage the hardest. We are determined to build back fairer from the pandemic by recognising the impact on the youngest children's social and personal skills, as well as their literacy and numeracy. Improving training for early years practitioners is one of the key levers for driving up quality in early education. So far, the government has committed 180 million to support education recovery in the early years, and this includes 153 million to build a stronger, more expert workforce, enabling settings to deliver high quality teaching and address the impact of the pandemic on the youngest children, with a focus on the most disadvantaged areas. These proposals build on our EYFS reforms to accelerate and embed real change for young children, which is more important than ever in light of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So thinking specifically about the 153 million investment that I just mentioned, this will deliver a universal training offer together with targeted support to leaders and practitioners to create a more sustainable self-supporting system, strengthen specialist expertise and leadership in the sector by boosting skills to develop children's early language and maths, as well as their personal and social development, improve the capacity of the early years workforce to support children with special educational needs, and train practitioners to support parents with home learning, which is one of the biggest drivers of early outcomes and future attainment. Next slide, please. So looking at one of the programmes that forms part of that package is the Stronger Practice programme, and this is comprised of 3 elements. A new universally accessible free online child development training to upskill practitioners and improve their knowledge of child development so they will be better able to support children in their care, particularly those whose development may have been impeded due to the pandemic. And whilst this is primarily aimed at those working with 0 to 4, it will be available to anyone that will find it helpful, including reception teacher, school-based staff and parents. So it will be accessible to anybody. And for those settings in need of most support, access to mentoring support for early years practitioners to help strengthen children's learning and development, along with bespoke whole setting and leadership support, and a network of early years stronger practice hubs to encourage evidence-based practice improvements via local networks. Next slide, please. And other key elements of the package include an expansion of the professional development programme for frontline practitioners to provide national coverage, an expansion of training to increase the number of staff in group-based providers and childminders with an accredited level 3 SENCO qualification, which will lead to better identification of SEND and better support for children with SEND. A review of level 3 qualifications leading towards a reformed evidence-based level 3 qualification. Substantially expanded numbers of places for initial teacher training in early years to increase the supply of qualified graduates to the sector. And programmes to train early years practitioners to support parents with home learning environment and improve children's early language and social and emotional development, giving priority to families that would benefit the most. In addition to those elements, there is also the National Professional Qualification in Early Years Leadership, which will be available from autumn 22. And finally, in addition to the 153 million and as part of the overall 180 million, there is the investment of up to 27 million to support children's early language development in light of the pandemic. This is comprised of up to 10 million for the second phase of the professional development programme for frontline practitioners to help boost early language, maths and personal and social and emotional development, and up to 70 million for the Nuffield Early Language Programme, also known as NELLY, for children in reception, which I'll talk to you about in a bit more detail now. Next slide, please. So even before experiencing the negative effects of the pandemic, over a quarter of the children in England were reaching age 5 without the skills they needed to thrive. These issues have been exacerbated by the pandemic, resulting in the need for a catch-up intervention aimed at supporting early language development. To support this, as I just mentioned, government have committed up to 17 million to improve the language skills of reception aged children who need it the most. Working with the Education Endowment Foundation and the Nuffield Foundation Education Limited, we are providing training and resources for NELLY free of charge to schools that will particularly benefit. NELLY is a 20-week intensive programme proven to help young children overcome language difficulties. It is designed by children in reception year and combines small group work with one-to-one sessions delivered by trained teaching assistants or other staff. Developed by a team at Oxford University, the intervention has been evaluated in robust trials, which have found that NELLY has had unparalleled levels of efficacy in improving early language skills, an average of 3 months additional progress. 2/3 of all primary schools in England have signed up for the programme, and schools were recruited with priority given to those with the highest proportions of pupils eligible for free school meals. It is estimated that 90,000 children will receive this targeted intervention, and over 300,000 pupils have already been screened. Next slide, please. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm conscious that I've been talking to you for quite some time and I've given you lots of information, but I hope you found the session useful. As Jill said, please do post your questions in the chat bar and we'll respond where we can, but we will be taking all of the questions away and responding in an FAQ document after all 3 events have taken place. There'll also be a chance to ask questions about assessment under the new EYFS during the next session. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of today's event.